Do you have your act together? Welcome to day 1,227 of What's Shipped to Now. She, S-H-E, Sharon Horne-Ellstrom happens to be my initials. So as I went from documenting everything in journals, I'm like a big journal and notebook kind of gal. I've got a whole stack of them sitting here, is why I bring that up. But as my vision tanked, my vision's gone downhill over the last, I don't know, 20, 30 years. Actually, ever since I was a kid, I had challenges with my eyes and other things. But the last couple of years in particular, it's gone. Just why sometimes my face is funky. Sometimes my delivery is funky because I don't have the pleasure or the ability to just look at notes and remind myself of what it is that I want to talk about. So I just have to go based on, well, what was I thinking about? What do I want to talk about? And what am I going to share today? Well, today, for Supersize Your Business, every day I share a business idiom in my Supersize Your Business group. And started doing it when I was moving, well over a year ago now, and packing. It was a couple of years ago now when I was packing and getting ready to move and going through things. When you're going through, 55, 60 some years of life, of stuff that you've collected over the years, it can be an overwhelming task. And so in order to get my act together, which was our idiom today, I started sharing an idiom every day with my business group and just looking up what does it mean, where did it come from, how might we apply it to our business and to our life. So today's was Get Your Act Together, and I found it very fun and very enlightening because I came across a list of 12 different ways to seriously get your act together. Now, it's just an article online, so you take it with a grain of salt, but there was really a modicum of truth, and I've done some of those things over the years to get myself in line and moving the direction I want to go in. And our act together is always the direction we want to go. So I was asking myself today, and I do it pretty often with the Get Up and Go challenge, do I have my act together? Or where am I in different areas and aspects of my life? Because we can overall say, do we have our act together? And where do we fall on a scale of 1 to 10? Because I like to put scales to things so I can measure them. Because so many things in our life are subjective based on just how we feel about them. And that can be measured and quantified by adding a scale to it. So I say, how well do I have my act together on a scale of 1 to 10? Now, I'm not going to answer the question yet. Maybe it'll come to me as I'm talking. But overall, guess what? My life is not a 10. Do I want my life to be a 10? Maybe, maybe not. I guess at this point in my life, I think that just living my life is an honor and a privilege, and just doing the things that I get to do that I want to do is an honor and a privilege. So how am I judging what's my scale include, and how do I define getting my act together, getting my life together, having my life in order? It's just a measure of my ideal life. How do I want my life to be? How do I want my act to be? How do I want to be showing up in the world? And then where do I think I am at any given moment, and usually the present moment, because that's the only time we can affect or impact. How am I doing? Do I have my act together? And that, to me, is just a question of, am I moving toward what I want at any given time, or am I moving away from what I want at any given time? And if I'm moving toward what I want, I am getting my act together. And so I'm making positive moves toward that, so that gets me above the average 5 scale. And if I'm moving away from it, that puts me below 5 with respect to me judging my own performance as far as getting my act together. But I thought it was fun because we seldom, as human beings, and I might be an exception because I do it several times a year, but we seldom sit down and say, how am I doing? How am I doing physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, financially, with respect to relationships, with respect to contribution and how I'm showing up in the world, with respect to my communication and my confidence? How am I doing? And I ask myself that pretty darn regularly, usually after a bout of negative self-talk or doing something where I felt like I should have done a better job. Because we are our own worst critics. At least the majority of people I've ever met, even if we don't show it on the outside, or people don't show it on the outside, we usually are our own worst critics. We beat ourselves up more than anybody else on the planet ever would. We say stuff to ourselves that no one on the planet would ever say to us, even through social media or to our faces. Well, some people might, but that's just because that's the way they feel about themselves. So getting our act together, I thought it was a good one. And I shared a list of 12 things just from an article that, and one of them was from our sponsors, the best dating and relationship advice you'll ever get. Well, that has nothing to do with getting our act together, except relationships are a part of how we determine if we have our act together or not, right? Are we in relationships? Do we have good relationships with the people we love and care about? Do we have good relationships with the people that we work with? And again, good is a relative term. We get to define and decide what good means for us. Maybe we don't care how close or family-like our work relationships are, because we've got an extended family that supports us in all the ways that we want. And it doesn't matter in our work and career. We want good relationships, good working relationships, but we get to define what those relationships look like. So it was a fun list that included some business-related things, a lot of just life lesson things, and things that we learn through having experiences, which is one of the things on the list. Be present, which is another thing on the list. Be living in the present moment, realizing it's the only time we've got, right? This minute, right now, this instant is the only guaranteed instant that I have or anybody else has. We are not guaranteed a future. We all have a past, nothing we can do about that, but we're never, any of us, guaranteed a future. So we want to make the most of where we are, what we're doing right now. Because where we are, what we're doing right now, might not be ideally where we want to be, but it's the only time we can take action to put things in motion to create something else in our lives. Our idiom was, again, get your act together. I thought it was a good one. I'd love to know your experience with this particular one. I've heard this one a lot in my life. Imagine that. People have told me, get your act together. What do you think you're doing? Da, 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 da. A lot of times, both in work and in play and in personal relationships, and from my parents and my family. It's like, when are you going to get your act together? When are you going to graduate from college? When are you going to do this? When are you going to do that? When are you going to get married? When are you going to have kids? Da, 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 da. On and on and on. We've all heard it. So, that was our idiom for today. In our annual challenge this year, our annual challenge is to do one thing every day that centers us. From the little journal book, do one thing every day that centers you. Based on, I picked my annual challenge for my own personal development, my own, what do I want to work on this year, and also what's available in these cool little journal books, or these little, I guess I'd call them journals, because I do the exercises right along with you, and I write the answers to, and I do the activity that I share every day. Started doing it, this is my 4th year, so we're almost in the middle of the 4th year of doing this every day, where I just look at the book. And why do I use the book? Why do I use a tool? I use a tool because it makes it an easy habit and automatic. Why am I still doing it, 4 years later? Because after the first year, guess what? It became a habit. Every day I was used to doing something. Prior to doing these books, I had decks, and I got a couple of them. I'm not going to dig one out, but I have these different decks. And so every day I would just pull a card randomly out of the different decks of cards as a personal development habit, to just look at and say, okay, I want to work on my wisdom, or my intuition, or my money handling, or my abundance mentality, or my mindset. Whatever it was, I would pick out of the deck, and a card would come up. And it would be some random saying, some random positive saying, right? I want to reinforce positive things in my life. But it would be something about, I'm just going to grab a deck now that I'm talking about it because it's bugging me. This one's well-being cards. So I would just randomly pick a well-being card out, read it, and that was my daily challenge, my daily thing. And then I came across these little journal books, and one was about doing one thing every day that scares you. And I wanted to stretch my comfort zone, because I'd learned from these different card decks and from reading and studying that we have a comfort zone, and within it, that's our average. That's where our behavior is. That's where we live and stay and do. It's like this invisible barrier around us that protects us, the way we behave, our beliefs, the things we think about. And so I would read one of these every day, and then that would be just the thought or the thing that I would carry with me throughout my day. So whenever I got off track, or I needed to get my act together, I wanted to think about something positive, I would think about that card. So for example, let's just look at one. This one says, magnifying glass, I envision more and act less. And then on the back, there's a longer little write-up, and it says, as you take the time to find images in your mind that are pleasing, you will more often achieve vibrational alignment with all things that you desire. From that alignment, you will experience more inspired ideas and assistance from others. Inspired action is very satisfying and extremely productive. Okay, so this is about creating what we want in life, right? Getting our act together. And so I would just have that with me, and I'd think about that throughout the day. So if something happened at work or in my business that was a little stressful or frustrating, and I wanted a positive spin on it, I would just pull out that card and read that card and think about that for a minute or two to get me back on track or get me feeling better about whatever was going on around me. Because sometimes we find ourselves in environments that aren't 100% in our best interests. Now, how do we get there? Well, of course, we put ourselves there based on the choices and decisions we made throughout our life. But just because we find ourselves there doesn't mean we consciously chose to be there. We made decisions and choices, and a lot of the decisions and choices that we make, we don't really think about. We just go with our gut instinct, and we don't always go with our gut instinct. We just do what we think we should do. And sometimes then we wake up and find ourselves in situations that are less than ideal for us. Might be perfectly ideal and awesome for someone else, but they're not right for us. And that's always the defining characteristic, is how does it make me feel? Is it for me or not for me? And if we go with our centered gut and we think about those things, we make a lot better choices, and we lead a lot happier, more fulfilled, positive life. If we feel better, we do better. If we do better, we have more positive results and outcomes, and our life is happier than if we were just flim-flamming through it and not paying attention to what's going on. So that's part of why I love doing this annual challenge. And this year's on getting to know myself better, being more centered, being more focused from within. Everything without comes from within, right? So we need to work on ourselves more than anyone else or anything else in order to create what it is that we want in our lives. And so today was about being lonesome and lonesome animals. And I think there's a big difference between being lonesome and being alone. A lot of people have learned this over the last year or so with COVID-19 and everything. I think a lot of people have learned that that to them, lonesome and alone are the same thing. And to me, they're very different words, very different feelings, very different things. I very seldom, if ever, feel lonesome, even though I spend a lot of time alone. Until this last year, I spent almost all my time physically alone, even before COVID-19, for a lot of reasons. For some health reasons, personally, for some visual challenge reasons, for things that were going on in my life and changes that were happening throughout my life. I spent a lot of time alone. The kids were off and creating and living their own lives, and I was divorcing, and by choice spent a lot of time alone. So to me, alone time, I love my alone time. I love my quiet alone time, because that's the time that I can guiltlessly work on and pursue the things that I'm interested in. I can read. Reading's more of a challenge these days, but I still seem to manage it. I'm in a reading challenge right now, which people would say, Jesus, you're legally blind. Why are you in a reading challenge? My kids shake their head at me. They're like, you need to do audiobooks, Mom. And I'm like, maybe, but I find creative ways to make it possible for me to still consume information in books, because I love books. I've loved books and reading since I learned how to read as a kid. And I'm not willing to give that up yet. So as long as I have any vision whatsoever, I figure out ways to read. And then once I have no vision whatsoever, then I will listen to books, and I'll continue to absorb material that makes me feel good and energized. So today it was about being lonesome versus being alone. I'd love to know how you've experienced that over the last year, especially with COVID and the pandemic and everything. I think that we have, a lot of us have been alone a lot. A lot of people that had never been alone before have either been alone or with a small group of people, our immediate families for the most part, for the better part of 2020 and 2021. And that has created, and we'll be finding out for decades, the impact of this year of craziness and chaos on people, but people and relationships and emotional, I want to say trauma, because I think for a lot of people, COVID-19 has been traumatic in that They have been forced into situations that they've never had to deal with before, and were totally ill-equipped to handle the changes that happen so fast and happen continuously. And I think that a lot of that was intentional. That's just my opinion. But whenever we are thrown in uncertain circumstances, it increases fear. And when we have increased fear, we're less able to act and think for ourselves. And I think, again, a lot of that has been, unnecessary and really heartbreaking as well. So that's it. Loneliness and get your act together. Those are my two big topics today. Again, pausing, Get Up and Go challenge until August. I think it'll be August 1st. We'll do our next Get Up and Go challenge. We'll do fewer this year because we're coming out of all the craziness that happened in 2020. We did it 6 times last year. We've done it twice already this year. We'll do it in August, probably October and December again. So we'll probably do it 5 times this year, just because it's my way of giving back and sharing some of the tools and some of the strategies and some of the things that I have personally used for decades to create success in my own life, both in the offline and the online world. And I want to share that with other people. It just was my way of giving back for 2020 because of the COVID, because of the pandemic. A lot of people were frozen and stuck in their tracks, not knowing what to do. And I was like, no matter what's going on outside of us, there's always things that we can do. Well, how do we decide? How do we look at, how do we manage this? How do we manage change? Guess what? Change is never going away. COVID-19, hopefully we won't ever see anything as ridiculous as that again. But, and I'm meaning not that the thing itself. We've had global issues and pandemics and health challenges before. We're human. We live in a very chaotic, crazy planet, and stuff's going to happen. But the way it's been handled or not handled, the way it's been dealt with, let's just say that leaves a lot for us to learn from as a global community in terms of how we should and will do things moving forward. It's got nothing to do with politics, by the way. It's got nothing to do with whatever we might personally believe. It's got to do with how do we as human beings make sure that we are better human beings overall, not just some people are way better off as human beings and everybody else is pretty much SOL, and that's not right. Now, life isn't fair. I have no illusions of life being fair, thanks to my dad for teaching me that as a young girl. Hey, stuff's going to happen. It's not going to feel fair or seem fair to you, but life is actually, even though we say life isn't fair, life is actually totally fair. And I'm sure that'll upset people that I say that, but life is fair in that we get out of life what we put into it. And it might not seem like that on the outside looking at people's situations and things that happen to them, but somehow our life is fair for us. We are getting out of our life what we're putting out into the world and into our life. And that doesn't always seem fair or feel fair from inside of us, but it actually really is. You know, what we put out in the world is what we get back. And sometimes we think we're putting a lot more out into the world that's of value, but it's really not, and we're kind of deluding ourselves. So when we're honest with ourselves and we say, okay, you know, life isn't fair, meaning everybody doesn't get the same thing in life. And wouldn't it be boring if we did? It'd be just like, I was talking to my granddaughter the other day, and we were talking about, wouldn't it be boring if there were a billion grandmas, me meaning, wouldn't it be boring if everybody was just like me? Wouldn't it be boring, and she and I were talking about, she's just turned 6, wouldn't it be boring if everybody was like you, just exactly like you? If we all looked alike, thought alike, behaved alike, you know, liked the same things, life would be terrible, boring and monotonous, and even more competitive. If everybody was the same and looked the same and wanted the same things, we'd all be competing with each other, and it would be chaos. So as much as some people think life should be fair, we should do all these things to make it fair for and equitable for everybody, that is the most unrealistic and ridiculous thought on the planet. You know, it's kind of like, probably get in trouble for saying this too, labor unions thinking everybody should make the same wage. Yep, labor unions were and are valuable in that they help to increase the wage for people, but they also encourage the lowest common denominator, the worst performance, the worst behavior. And we are rewarded based on what we put into the world, what we contribute, not that we just show up. And I think that we're in trouble for a while here as the world realizes that there's more to life than just showing up. There's more to life than just being around, hanging out. It's what we put into life that matters. All right, I'm getting off on a tangent. If I can help you in any way, if you're struggling, if you don't know what to do next, if you've got a question and nobody to ask, and you've looked and you've tried to figure it out and Googled it, but you're just stuck, hit me up in the comments below or direct message me. Again, I always say I might not know the answer, but I guarantee I can help you get to your next step, get to the thing you need to do next so that you don't feel stuck. One of my biggest frustrations coming online, actually in running my own businesses as well, until I created the teams that helped to support me. One of the things I missed most when I left corporate America was that I had unlimited resources at my fingertips. I had access to great minds, great resources, great people. And when I left and went out on my own, I did that without creating that structure around myself first. And so there was this big gap and outage in, I need somebody that can do IT for me. Had it all the time in my corporate life. Here I am in this manufacturing business. We need some IT help. I don't have the experts I can call. So what did I do? I called my old corporate experts and said, hey, who do you know that I can hire to do this? And so we get creative with that. But until we create that structure, there's a gap between where we are and where we want to be. And our job throughout our entire life, just keep filling that gap to move us toward what we want. All right, have an awesome day. I will, of course, be with you tomorrow.